But let me just wind up, just to bring it all together for you. So you've heard from myself and from now just Leslie, how Garvan, through the Kinghorn Centre for Clinical Genomics, we're certainly at the centre of Australia. We think we're the centre of the universe in medical research, but it's probably not quite true. But we're certainly the centre in Australia, we like to think so, and certainly in the Southern Hemisphere, for being able to do this kind of genomic research because of the technologies that we've assembled together and the expertise. Very importantly, the expertise in the people that we have here. We mustn't ever forget that. You've heard from David about the work that we do in cancer. There's a lot of different areas in cancer research that we apply genomics to. You've heard just a little bit of that. You've heard from Chris the immune disorders, autoimmunity, immunodeficiencies. There's a lot of work going on in that area. In terms of looking at children with disabilities, physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, Tony Roscioli, who's overseas at a conference, is leading a big program in really trying to unravel the kinds of things that Leslie was talking about and Chris are talking about in terms of rare diseases, disorders that you really have to go on a forensic exercise to try and figure out what that genetic disorder is. A lot of work going on in that area here. But the kinds of things that we're also doing that we didn't talk about today, and we probably will over next year, Parkinson's disease and movement disorders. While we're here at Garvan have the technology and have a lot of the scientists, we also collaborate very broadly across Australia and increasingly so internationally. Got a program with the Colling Institute at Parkinson's disease and movement disorders in genomics. We work with the people next door, Victor Chang, right next door to us, cardiomyopathies and the genetics underlying that. Diabetes, we're developing programs in type 1 and type 2 diabetes in genomics. Polycystic kidney disease, some of you will know our our ex-executive director John Shine is working with Tim Furlong at St Vincent's on looking at the genetics of kidney disease and genomics, and also osteoporosis. So we're working in all the areas that Garvan's interested in and beyond those areas of medical need here at the Garvan. So let me just really wrap this up for you, just quickly about what the future is that Leslie's talked about and David and Chris are currently doing, and many others. So we've said your genome is what you're born with and what you die with, apart from those cells that kind of change. But your genome is you. It's with you your entire life. And we have been using genetic information for decades now in terms of family planning and genetic disease that we go to genetic clinics to look at what our children might inherit from us. So family planning, using that in prenatal diagnosis is what we currently do. Genetic disease that Chris and Leslie talked about, probably 2, possibly more. We're not actually quite sure how many children with severe disabilities have a genetic disorder that we're unraveling. And that's what Leslie and Chris were talking about. We're doing this with much better precision through genomics, but it's not really a different area of health, of healthcare. We're doing it better, we're doing it faster, we're doing it more accurately, we're getting better information for these individuals. So we're certainly, a lot of our work, as you've heard, is engaged in that part of the exercise. What the future is a little bit what we've alluded to, but we haven't really talked about. So let me explain that to you. We know that from young adulthood through the period of adulthood to older age, that we do, many of us will get cancer, heart disease, dementia, stroke, many of these disorders that affect individuals throughout our adult life, and increasingly so as we age. What will really genomics, where we hope that genomics will really benefit society more broadly than what we've been talking about with diagnosing children with disease, is screening individuals for their predisposition to some of these disorders at an earlier age, if we can, before they get disease. And David talked about this in the cancer area. If we know in young adults that they're likely, because they've inherited some genetic variants that could lead to disease, if we know that, there are a number of lifestyle interventions that can be put in place. Individuals can be monitored much more closely to whether they're going to have a cardiac arrest. They can be monitored much more closely to see if there's a cancer developing much earlier than we would have otherwise looked at. And also some mitigation of disease, and you would know in cancer it's for the BRCA1 mutations, some surgical mastectomy intervention is what some people will choose in order to prevent them getting a disease when they might at a later age. And so this is the area that we really need to do a lot of work in. And we anticipate that maybe in 5, 10, 20 years, we don't know how long this is going to take. It could take 10 years. I'm hoping it's all going to be done in my lifetime, but we're not sure about that. It's a lot of work, as you've heard today. We're hoping that at some point, and as Leslie alluded to, because you carry your genetic code with you from an early age, the earlier we can put your genetic code into as part of your e-health record, the clinicians that you see at any stage in your medical health history will have access to that information and will be able to use that information to either help your diagnosis or help the treatment of a disease much more accurately and efficiently than what we're able to do. And what we haven't talked about, and we may have a session on it next year, is about how genetics really does influence responses to medications, certainly to a lot of medications that are used, and anaesthetics and other medications. Some people, as you know, you take some medication and you go, it's just not working. Other people kind of take the medication and it's like, whoa, yes, it goes really, really quickly. We all vary, and that some of that is embedded in our genetic code. And so if you knew that from a young age, you'd know a lot more. You could kind of predict and be able to use that information. So what we want to do in terms of genomics is get more clinical utility out of all of those letters that we've each got. What does it all mean for you as an individual? What are the letters that are important in this lifetime of health risks? But the fine print. So let me just leave you with a couple of messages, just so that we don't get overexcited about all of this. Not all disease has a genetic basis, so I would not like any of you to go away and think that if we've got your genetic code there in your e-health record, we will be able to predict every single thing that will happen in your life. It is not the case. Not all disease has a genetic basis, and so genome sequencing cannot totally predict the future of your health. That is a truism, and it will always be a truism. Some cases, as we've heard, genetics predicts your risk. You may have a gene defect, but you may not get the disease. And that's also something that's really important to remember. It's not necessarily, it depends on what that genetic mutation is, in what gene it is, as Leslie's talked about, as Chris has talked about, and others. You may not get the disease. And also, not all diseases that are genetically based are currently treatable. We're hoping that the treatment, drug discovery will go hand in hand with gene discovery, and that we will be able to treat diseases. But not all, particularly neurodegenerative diseases, we can't treat them at the moment. And so the question is, if we tell you that you're going to get that disease and we can't treat it, is that a good idea? And do you really want to know? I don't know that I do, quite honestly. And so, as Leslie alluded to, there are all these ethical issues that will require, every time somebody has a genome sequence, certainly at the moment, need some counselling around what to expect about your disease risk. And if we find something, what will that mean for you? Will we be able to treat it? Do you want to know? And should you know? And then at what stage should we be sequencing individuals? Should we be sequencing children when they have got no way of consenting to any of this? And it needs to be up to parents to provide that consent. So there's a whole ethical framework around this, because it opens up, as Leslie said, all kinds of information that is really good on the one hand, but a little bit frightening on the other hand as well. And so we've got to just match those two things together. And what we need to do is, what this forum is all about, is talk to you, explain to you what we do know currently, and keep the population up to date with progress in these areas, so that whenever we speak to you, we can accurately tell you what the state of play is. And whenever you go and see a clinical geneticist, you know what kinds of questions to ask, because you're prepared from the information that we've been giving you. So I hope that's answered a lot of your questions about genomics, and means that as you're sitting on the bus home or on the train, that you'll just nudge the person next to you and say, hey, do you know about genomics? And you'll be able to say, let me tell you.